you, Sally. Okay. So it was kind of interesting. The chairs, I guess they get together at the beginning of the year, or they used to before COVID. And so they're trying to get back into the swing, the county of inviting us to get together. And so one commission, it was the small business or the business, I can't remember the full name, group, just talked about how they do their meetings. And it was a little bit of a different world. Maybe that's why they were invited to speak, because their model is a bit different from the way other people do things. But I wrote down a couple of things that I thought were interesting to think about. One is that they rotate their host or facilitator for different meetings. I thought that was interesting. And I mean, again, they have, they're up to different stuff. And so they have a host who organizes the meeting, invites presenters, et cetera. But just to think about maybe whether we would think about having members host or co-host particular meetings as a way, partly in a way to get some of the newer members to roll up their sleeves a little bit and think about leadership roles at the partnership. What else? They had staff lead a meeting. Our partnership hasn't really, when we had Kim, she really was leading a lot of meetings. But it's been a while since we had a meeting run by our coordinator. I will give the coordinator update since Lynn is not on this call. Lynn he mentioned in our prior partnership meeting that the coordinator, we were reopening to hire for that position. He had come up with some strategy for making the process move as quickly as possible. Yeah, it's been a year since we've had a full-time coordinator. We're now at the year mark. That's a long time for Sally and Lynn to be covering all those responsibilities. And so on the hiring, we are looking at videos. So using Spark Hire this time to pull candidates, and Lynn looked through a lot of different potential candidates. We'll have the same hiring committee that we had back in the fall. So for the first round, I was in the first round interviews with Lynn from public schools, Kristen Devaney. So it was a good group. And so we'll look at those videos and see for the first round who we are interested in, how the candidates look, and move that forward. So have we done rotating, chairs? I guess I'm asking a legacy question. So I'm looking at Judy, not rotating chairs, but meeting leads from the past?
No, not usually. No, and we didn't always have, it kind of depended on who was chair of the partnership as far as leadership of the meetings. So I think since you were around, Kim, that was just the choice of whoever the chair was at that time. Kim did that, but in the past, definitely not. Devanshi Patel was leading the meetings all the time, and it worked out great. And so did Linda Henderson, and who did she do it with? Barbara, I think. And there were others where, and then there would be input from staff and reports from staff. But I actually kind of like that, because I thought that shows that the other members sitting there, that the committee members are really invested in this. And it really encourages you to pay attention. And I don't know, Rick, what do you think? You were around when Devanshi and some of the others were
I do
there.
remember Devanshi. I think this is a group right now. We're collecting opinions and different ideas, and we're in a better position with a stronger leader rather than a diffused leadership. You've got a person who is sort of setting the direction, and your ideas are all very good and I appreciate it so much, but this is the direction we're going. That I saw with Devanshi. And I do think in this time of sort of instability, it's important to have a leader running the meeting, but I also think it could be done in a way that gives other people opportunities to also lead topics or lead conversations or do particular discrete things. But I agree with Judy that having a person there sort of orchestrating things from the top, I think is needed, especially at this time.
Well, what we've done in the past, when you had to me, it's sort of, John, we're talking about leading meeting, who led the meetings in the past and how it worked out. And I was saying Linda and Barbara ran coordinated the meetings, but then there were portions when they brought in Kim to talk about things. And then I'm trying to think, and I said Devanshi definitely led the meetings, but then so did Ann Bordebrugge when she was, who was she with? Linda? Anyway, I guess it sort of reinforces for me, and I think for the members sitting out there in the meeting, it reinforces this is community led. And it's sort of inspiring, hey, this really is community led. They're not just pretending this is community led. These people are prepared. They've been talking to people, and they certainly had Kim's help organizing the meeting at all, and other staff. But I think it says a lot about the partnership and what we say we are. And it keeps people motivated, I think.
Yeah, and so John, just to back up slightly, and I'm glad you made it into the room. I was in a meeting of chairs of county commissions, and one of the chairs presented on a practice that they have. This was the small business or the business commission, and they rotate hosts, so different members. So the chair kind of is more of a moderator role, and then hosts are the members, and each host sets the agenda for a meeting, et cetera. And so I thought that was an interesting idea and a way to kind of try out new leadership. And then they also have staff run
Leadership
one meeting.
Arlington works that way. Leadership Arlington has a monthly event, and a group of 2 or 3 people out of their 30 work on that event, set it up, do the whole thing, so that the staff are coordinating and meeting. I mean, Kim did a lot of coordinating back scenes. She'd do the inviting when we'd suggest who to invite. She'd set the timing of the meeting. She'd send out notices. I mean, she was busy, but she wasn't running the meeting and she wasn't setting the agenda. She was working with P&D, with the chair to set an agenda, probably with the chair mostly. By the time we got to P&D, I think the meetings were pretty well set up. But yeah, that's certainly a way to develop leadership. And given that our meetings are an hour and a half long, I would think you could have a member deal with a half an hour of it. And then you and the coordinator might set up an hour's worth of reports or activities or whatever else might go with it. But there'd be a special piece of interest to that person, whether it's education or public housing or health or whatever, that they could run.
You talked
People
about
run it, they don't get to be good leaders. Excuse me, Rick.
I'm interrupting you, excuse me. Judy talked about the idea of committee heads or committee members sort of providing reports to the group. Isn't that right, Judy?
I don't know.
Part of the meeting is, okay, here, let's hear the report from the HCAT group or whatever the group is. Let's hear what's going on. So there's sort of accountability of the group, and then the chairperson sort of calling on people to.
More or less coordinating, and people would know ahead of time what, but you know, Kim always had a big role there, but I thought that it worked pretty well when and I think it worked especially well when there were co-chairs that led the meetings. And then there were usually portions of the meeting when staff had reports to make, and staff did quite a bit, but I just felt like it encouraged people to read, be on their toes, and participate.
Okay, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I thought it was an interesting idea. And I think it's something, to sort of keep thinking about. I'll tell you that I am ever so slowly, but hopefully I'll pick up the pace, meeting one-on-one with community members, especially starting with the ones that I don't see in these P&D meetings, so that I can hear their thoughts about how the meetings should go, and different issues like how, what kind of work we should be doing with the data, and just different things to get some one-on-one time with them. So this is great to have some of the background, because I can raise it. And then, all my meetings are going to end with, so would you ever want to serve again as chair or vice chair?
There you go.
Right. Yeah. And Rick, just to say, I've tried different styles of leading meetings. I used to run a boatload of meetings when I worked for the Obama administration. I led the civil rights office. And I do, I like kind of a combination of charging ahead and consultative leadership. And so that's kind of what I'm aiming for. But I welcome feedback, because I think sometimes it can seem a little slow. I've liked these meetings because I like when people have a chance to really brainstorm together. And I miss having the other folks from the partnership in these brainstormy type situations. So, always looking for opportunities to do some of that. But I'll tell you, as we move, maybe we can move to the agenda to make sure we get to that. I sort of am in the mood for a presentation, just to say, I feel like it's time to learn something new. I know one thing, what I loved coordination for is Kim at these meetings would always say, okay, 2 months ago, we talked about doing this at a future meeting. Is now a good time for that? I love that tracking. But I do know that Project Peace has been waiting, and I'd love to hear thoughts of others on what might be timely. I'm way too late to do a Black History Month feature, probably, because it's a little late to be asking people to present on a particular topic and to get guests. It's a short month. But other ideas for potentially for the next meeting, Project Peace doesn't have to be next, but that's one that we had on our list. And another idea I had also was and remind me if we already had them last year, but the oh shoot, what is it? Restoring Arlington. So the restorative justice folks. Yeah,
that's very timely. Yep.
Did their report just come out recently, Rick?
Yes, there's something. Yeah, they recently, I was at a meeting where they said something important has happened in the process, and they're ready to move forward.
Yeah.
And it's a little edgy, so that makes it interesting. Edgy in the sense that they're going to start sinking their teeth into people who really would not have gotten a alternative sentencing plan in the past, but will now. And so, there's lots of thoughts about, lots of questions about how it's actually going to work. And I'm sure there's enough controversy to make it interesting.
So our civic association just had Restoration or Restorative Arlington at our meeting this month, but I missed the meeting.
Yeah, well.
So, but it makes sense that they're rolling out. And one of the recommendations I saw, they did link to the report, was, now they're looking at sort of amplifying through groups like ours as a next step.
Megan, I always feel like we get super ambitious and we can't do everything. And we're the Partnership for Children, Youth and Families. And not that any of those, it's a problem with any of those, but ideas. but that, looking at the areas that people feel like they need more information, to be really intentional about that have to do with, whether it's the data. And so we, have some sort of try to learn more about some aspect of life that in Arlington that is showing up in the data that we're questioning or unhappy with, or whatever it is, something that people can learn from, and it relates to what we want to do to move on, makes us better informed,
Well,
and
there
not
was a,
just what. Go ahead, John.
well, there was a Brookings EI, whatever it is,
Right.
the conservative think tank report that came out today on children, basically.
Right.
And they have some absolutely wonderful graphs in there showing how the boys have been falling farther behind over the years in terms of academic skills and going to college, lots about ethnicity. I mean, much of what we've been talking about for raising kids, and some positive graphs that the use of alcohol and marijuana by and large seems to be coming down slowly, but coming down. And that's nice. And teenage births is just going way down from what it was only a few years ago. So something is happening there that's very positive. It's a long report, but a third of it is probably just references. And it's really a first-rate report. I really recommend it.
I started
There
watching
folks who could
today.
present on it? What's that?
Is it called rebalancing? I have a link if that's it.
Yes.
Yeah,
I'll drop it in the chat.
Okay, because I started watching it today, but I was hoping to go. I couldn't watch the whole thing. It's long, and so I was going to watch it later.
well, I find it's easier to look at a 128-page report than to listen to an hour and a half.
I know. I was doing other
They
things.
were good, but I did other things while I watched. But
Mhm.
that's my point. They didn't show any data. They just talked. And if you look at the
Right.
data, I think a lot of the guts of the report
Right.
is what they've accomplished. And it's data that we have too for Arlington by and large. And that would be a really nice comparison
What?
for Grace to do is here's what the national, here's what we're doing. So,
Yeah.
and that's very relevant to everything we're going to recommend. It includes mental health, it includes educational things, includes the opportunity gap. I mean, it's all, this is a couple-year report, and clearly there was a lot of dissension between the players because they intentionally picked reasonably liberal and reasonably conservative academicians and probably mostly academicians.
Are they based in Washington?
Well, Brookings and yeah,
So imagine, I mean, I think these timely things are very good to bring to people because it also brings value. Wow, I went to the partnership and heard about this thing. I don't know if it'll be the latest thing, but that's always interesting. And
came
Love
out
it.
today.
Do we have a presenter in mind that could bring that to us?
Easy enough to ask.
that's kind of what they do, right?
I mean, the panelists today were from all over the country because they're and they put the report together on Zoom. But a speaker could be anywhere in the country too, if we want to do a 20-minute speech, Zoom Q&A or something like that. I mean, we don't have in-person speakers, so.
That's a good point.
Is someone interested in inviting them for this or a future meeting to take on the outreach?
I
Or
can
you suggest-
contact Brookings. I mean, I'm sure I know somebody there, but I'm not sure who it is. I have to look and see who's there these days, but I can do that.
I think that'd be very exciting to sort of get the juices flowing. And also ways for us to use data to advocate.
Well, I was going to ask in terms of kind of a report or what we'd like, if we know what we might advocate over the course of the next 3 or 4 months, 6 months, what would we need to know better in order to make our advocacy convincing? I mean, just saying we need more mental health professionals, the answer is of course. We need more people to get shots for COVID, of course. But now what? What's the What's
Well,
the
I do
real
think,
point?
so I think the idea would be, when we do these presentations, especially in the next few months, what are the emerging trends for right now? What is not, what, I wouldn't say where are the calls for action going to be coming from? Where are the deficits most obvious? When something needs to be done, what is it? Then as we get our own data, we can say, well, as we can see, this is, one thing it's clear, boys are losing ground and, we need to make efforts. And then we weave in this is why we need more mental health people in the schools. Of course, childcare has a huge impact on all that. I mean, it's all of these things are interwoven into the themes that we're usually going to be talking about anyway. So, we don't just have people to come talk about stuff, but we tell them this is what we're interested in. Talk about this aspect of the stuff that you're doing, because this is what this group is really working on: children, youth, and families. And
The
mental
woman
health.
from Economic Advisors for the White House, she was saying that what's happened with the poor education of especially minority men is that they have fewer marriages, and the fewer marriages lead to more single moms. And that is a difficult financial situation for the moms and is awkward, in fact, for educational purposes, because they don't have the extra time to work with their kids. And so she was saying that just looking back at the education of boys has large, wide-ranging social effects later. So she was an economist, but she was digging pretty deep into social science too.
Mhm.
Megan, I'm thinking, if people knew that we are focused for, the time being, or for this year, or looking at the data or whatever is certain thing, and then they know that at our meetings, we're going to be talking about different pieces of this, different aspects, then they maybe won't want to miss a meeting, because if things kind of build on each other, we're trying to educate ourselves or understand things. If we're going to make a difference, we need, we want to be informed. We want to know the questions to ask. It may help us get people to come to the meetings, and not just once in a while, but things really build on one another.
So that might be a segue, although it doesn't seem like it, to have Rick and I talk a little bit about our meeting with Kim this last week, which I thought was very exciting. And it might speak to having Kim or one of her staff come to talk to us about what they do. Rick, do you want to?
So let's see, yes, in my note here. So, just as a summarize, we talked about this idea of a community navigator. My interest comes from the need of what we're seeing in our programs of kids who are sort of floating around, kids who are not thriving as well as they could. Nobody's paying, I shouldn't say nobody, but the attention they're getting, the attention that is available to help young people is going to the kids who are more serious in their problems. So if you divided the population up into quarters, the bottom quarter is getting services and attention because of their more dire needs. The top quarter is doing fine. They come from families with resources, and they have their own abilities to do things. Then you get the two middle quarters. The upper one is also kids who are not the best, but they're doing okay. And then you've got the below average ones who are. I'm hearing there's a lot of questions about truancy. There's a big problem with kids not being in school. They know enough about the system to not get on the radar by missing an entire day of school, but they're definitely not doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're not connected with other kids. We know there's lots of kids playing electronic games. And so the idea is, how do you get people to do things? You just can't have a webinar and expect kids to sign up, or like what the Teen Network Board is doing is great. For example, that's a really great opportunity, a great thing to get in, but there's certain kids that aren't able to go or don't know about it or whatever. And so the thought is, what can you do to help these kids? And our thought is this idea of, what if there are people in the neighborhood, in the building where these kids lived, who are sort of like resources to families, not just the teenagers, we have the example of cases like Harvey Hall and AHC properties that have like daycare centers on site, and they have after-school programming and stuff. I think a lot of their things are more oriented toward young children and elementary school age kids. So the thought too is, we need adults who are out in the community actually interacting with these kids at their homes where they're hanging out and stuff, who are not court. The court and probation officers did kind of used to do that for the kids who are on probation, but we're definitely moving away from that. The schools, unfortunately, because of COVID, things have been very difficult for the schools. They're trying to cover 5 million different bases. The sports and things, I guess that is one place where there's some stuff going on, but even still with COVID. So that sort of lays the ground for the issues, right? Are there more issues, Mia, that I'm leaving out?
Yeah, I would say just the navigator model in general. I think the conversation with Kim was really exciting because she brought her whole team, or maybe Rick and I interrupted a team meeting, were invited to a team meeting. And so they just talked about kind of, this being on site, one-on-one, and word of mouth conversations. It starts with a little bit of incentive to come to meetings, but they talked about over the years, the different kinds of meetings and interaction, and big success they've had getting, people who, to come to them as a resource, and then the community navigators just do, what you might expect based on the title, which is connect them with services or help them meet their needs. And so, but that presence at a site sounds like it's been part of what's very helpful, because then, over time, people get used to having you there. And that also, Rick, to add on the piece from our email exchanges before this meeting. So the Communities in Schools funding that just came from Mackenzie Scott, I think Scott is her last name, it's that community navigation model, but the building isn't one of these APA or AHC buildings, but instead is the school building. And so even though we don't have that program at Barcroft, there are, often teachers or PTA fill the role when students and their parents have a need. Is there a person that they can kind of gel around to bring their needs to? And so I love the idea. That article is really timely as we're thinking about community navigators, to think about maybe it would be a school-based person. Maybe now's the time, and I'll turn it to John, who I know, I hope, John, you don't feel like a broken record, because I know you've talked about this in prior meetings, but to think about what Carlin Springs still has, if they do, and how to put that in another school as a navigation model.
It's a functioning community school, and they have, in fact, a navigator. I forget what her title is, but she is the one that meets with parents and the after-school programs and the volunteers, and it's a very full-time position. And she's the one that has to collect the data to find out if there's any progress because of the programs. And in fact, the partnership's first data coordinator is Amy Graham, and she's the one that put together the way of doing the analysis that's held up since. And it's, the kids that do the after-school programs, do they do better in school? Yes, they attend more. Do their grades better? Yes, they are. So the after-school activities help. If they ask the kids, they don't skip school as much. Why? They tend to come on the day they've got an after-school activity more than the day they don't. So they're not coming for school, they're coming for Girls on the Run, early Madrid, whatever it is, soccer clubs. So it's clearly a valuable model. And there's strong interest in the foundation that spun off of the partnership. It has a new name now, but used to be called the Partnership Foundation for blah, blah, blah. And we're trying to say, we'd love to start a community school somewhere else, but you don't just proclaim it. There is some legwork ahead of time to get some data, to understand the process, to get some parents willing to be involved in it. And so it does take a while. Exactly. Thanks, Robert.
I can't pull up the chat. Can you help me? I'm sorry. That's why I keep stabbing at my phone. What did you just say, Robert?
Let me unmute. Oh, I was just jumping in to piggyback on what John was saying, that Carlin Springs also has a dedicated school health nurse, which is unique because they're typically shared amongst elementary schools. So they have, and that's very deliberate. It's part of the communities and schools model, where the nurse as well is supposed to act as a community navigator of sorts in terms of referrals. That's something that we would love to see a nurse in every elementary school. But I don't want to take us off on a public health tangent. I just wanted to.
You're not at all.
Mhm.
And that's another follow-up item, and not to pull us off this topic,
Mhm.
but that was raised in our prior partnership meeting, county budget issues and things we should be supporting. And we heard loud and clear that we want a social worker and a psychologist in every school, and I think nurse in every school.
Well, the advantage of the nurse at Carlin Springs is they don't just deal with the kids that are walking in. They can then find out and follow up on, did they get their eye exam? Did they get the hearing exam? Did they get to a dentist? If they didn't get to a dentist, let's find a dentist that'll take them given their economics or their insurance or whatever it might be. So that the half-time nurse is dealing with the kids that need half-time nursing. The full-time nurse can follow up on a case rather than check the box. I've done it. I spent 10 minutes with this kid today. It's a statistic. So it really is the difference between immediate care of whatever level and the social work component of a good medical practice. So it's working wonderfully.
I was going to say just the social work aspect of that. And this is, the model that I'm more familiar with is to have a social worker to help the lawyers. There are a number of things that are follow-up and sort of community resource that don't require a professional degree. You don't have to be a nurse, to do all of the follow-up, although maybe the nurse is the example where you really want some of that professional follow-up. But some of this liaison work, the communities in schools, the article in the Washington Post said, you don't want the teacher to be the person who's always the glue. Why not have another person with sort of different skills? And the skills would be they come from the community, that can do that. And I would love to know before I cede the conversation, the floor. Not that we have a floor in this meeting, but John, if there's, is there somebody at Carlin Springs who could talk to us directly? Because
Sure.
What I see for 2 future meetings is a school-based person and then Kim's group.
Well, I don't know the nurse there, but Carol Sabatino has been the coordinator for the community school model for, Judy may remember, 5-6 years, something like that. And she can certainly talk about, she made a presentation on video that's been taped for the superintendent probably 1.5 years ago when he first came in 2 years ago. So there is a tape and she can do it. She can do it in 10 minutes or 20 or.
I would love that.
Any given, some Wednesday evening in the next couple of months is what you have in mind?
Yeah. What do you think, Rick? And now I'm going to stop talking over you. But do you think we could have Kim's team at our next meeting? If they're available, or Carol, whoever could make it to the Wednesday? And then the other follow.
I mean, I think these are people who are demonstrating, showing kind of what we're talking about, but what could be, possible. So yes, I think it's worthwhile to have these people come. Say, hey, because these are also people who are, especially the people who are directly serving. They can tell you, no, this is the problem. The problem with this situation is X. Because they're out there on the street, they got their finger on the pulse of the community. They have a love for the community they're serving in a way that's probably different from many of us who don't have that same direct contact. One of the things too that I know you and I have talked about, Megan, is we do have the community and schools model seems like a good plan, but it has its limitations. It's not community in somebody's home or community at the local playground. So, and it's, it does seem to be more oriented toward elementary age kids. Your point about not having professionals is also very important because, not every kid needs a social worker, needs a psychotherapist, needs a doctor to get the information they need. They just need, a person, that probably every family should have, every kid should have access to, but not everyone in Arlington has access to that person. I think Michael Swisher, as I recall, one of his initiatives is the idea of having one, there's something called the askable adult. Have we talked about in this group?
You'll hear
Always
that
have
from
one person.
Project Peace.
And then just a person that you can go to and ask a question of, and you can trust and whatever that you might not have anywhere else in your life. And so
Well, the
that
Community
folds into that
Foundation
as well.
has a 200 homes activity, and they're trying to say, take a family that's got multi-generational poverty still and help them find a person they trust who can then navigate them to any services to which they would normally be entitled if they only knew that they existed.
Mhm.
And before the pandemic, we're working on this, and the positive results were coming in very nicely. Better employment, happier at home, school, more attendance at school, go on from there. I mean, there were small changes, but all real and very much in the same direction. Then the pandemic hit and all bets are off. But that's the same principle of one person you go to. My personal experience, my wife has been helping resettle refugees on and off, well, pretty much full time for 40 years as a volunteer. And she does not have a degree in law or medicine. She's a speech pathologist. And she was able to be the navigator for innumerable families where all you had to do was know what their problem is and then say, well, where's a good immigration lawyer? Where's somebody that can deal with family problems? Where's a dentist? I mean, you just have to have the trust of the family or the student or the teen to share their needs. If they don't share their needs, you can't do much but look blank. If they'll tell you what the problem is, then as an adult with interest, you can go find some solutions usually. And sometimes it's a second or third step to get to the right solution. I don't know, but I'll call Northern Virginia Family Service. Well, we don't do it here, but we can do it over at the Women's Center. Bingo. You just got somebody talking to somebody about some issue. So it takes some persistence, and you have to recognize that you can't solve every problem. But you can do it. In the Askable Adult, there's a new brochure. It'll be online in a few weeks, I think, from Project Peace, and it's about Askable Adults. So it'll be published and distributed when we get the new data in. But at the moment, we're working on 2020 data, I think, from the kids. And you don't want to publish in 22 in hard copy 2020 data if you've got 22 data coming in, 21 data, in a few weeks, I hope. I don't know what Grace's schedule is for the Virginia data, but it was originally January, so could be soon.
One thought on, I think it's a good idea to have Kim's, I don't know what her department is called, but that model shared with partnership members. But I wonder if we could, in the same meeting, have, say, we know APA and I think NHC, different housing groups have, there's someone on the Youth Mental Health and Wellness Committee. She's new. She took over Venus Burgess's position. I think that's kind of her role. She's a social worker, but she just became, I don't know. I haven't talked with her. We've just emailed, but I was thinking we could do kind of 2 different models or 3, whatever, in a meeting. So we cover more territory and people don't kind of get thinking, oh, this is the way it's done. And then they don't come to the next meeting and they don't know that there are other ways of doing this too. So as much as we could do, and plus we can always have information or a resource person from whatever, who knows, who has a broader view, to share information also, along with these groups that, the, what do I want to say, the ones that are right there on the ground doing it.
Oh, Kim's program is government delivered. The
Right.
APA and AHC ones are nonprofit residential site delivered.
Right.
Oh, no, the connection was Kim is her program is in APA and
Yeah,
AHC.
Yeah, we
buildings.
know. Yeah, that's
They're
right.
interconnected.
Right.
And over at the
Yeah,
Rinker
I
Center.
I have a meeting at 6:15. But if you want to volunteer me for something while I'm gone, now is the moment. You can do it.
Thanks, Rick.
We have an Aurora House meeting for my supervisor, Earl. But I'll check back with you, Megan, if that's okay.
Yeah,
And,
thank
I
you.
don't want other people to leave the meeting and follow my bad example either, so.
All right.
Thanks, Rick.
Judy, I like the idea of having more than one model in a meeting so we can sort of build a little bit of idea generation.
Right.
I'm aware haven't heard from Dina. We don't have to. But do you have?
Well, honestly, like this is my first meeting of this type with you guys. So a lot of this is just for me to understand the context of how this works, what the committee does, what the group does. So I'm still in learning mode, to be honest, since I've only joined the group, I think 2 months ago. So
This is a good
Thanks so
idea for you
much
to
for
come
coming.
tonight. That's good.
you got it.
Yeah,
You did.
really glad. I hope there's enough time. I wonder if we could, it sounds like the Askable Adult from Project Peace would be another potential counterpoint, if we can't get schools, if we can't get Carol Sabatino and someone from Kim's team at the same meeting, that we could do an Askable Adult piece, at the same meeting. And then I love the idea of trying to talk to navigators from other models. I wonder if communities in schools is one of those outside models. I mean, not to keep going back to schools, and now I think Rick had to drop, but I don't see a reason why there can't be a trusted Askable Adult with the higher grades. And I know even sometimes those student resource officers or school resource officers were the trusted adult for some of the kids. I know my daughter always really looked up to the resource officers. And so, but yeah, to have some sort of, it comes down to who the person is, I think, more than what their title is.
So if we're going to ask people to join us at the next meeting, what's the order of asking? So if they say yes, we don't go too far down the line. If they say no, we pick the next one. Do you have preference of community and school, Askable Adult, Brookings, Carol Sabatino?
I
Kim?
would love to try and get some momentum on this navigator stuff with Carol and Kim, if they're both available. What do you guys think? If only one's available, then do we tap into, is it Kirsten who's doing Project Peace?
Well,
I get
Abby
my-
Raphael is. I'm not sure who the other players are there, but yeah, we can.
Oh, it's somebody who came to our last meeting, Kristen. Or
Okay.
Kirsten.
Oh,
And
you're
she
talking
was-
about Kirsten. Okay.
She was ready to present on it, but we put her off to a future meeting.
Okay.
Well, with the brochure coming out in a couple of weeks, it's a perfectly reasonable, I mean, it may be hot that night, could go on web. I'm not sure what they have in mind for getting it out. We're just editing it now.
Yeah, you just don't want to get things mixed up. If you're looking at models where you have we all should be Askable Adults, but if we're looking at a group, a real initiative that it's like APA has, or like Carolyn Springs, those seem to, like you said, to compare within the same meeting. You can kind of listen to different versions of the same they've got the same purpose basically, but they do it in different ways. Or have different funding. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that would be my dream meeting. I'm just thinking of backups.
Yeah, okay.
Is to have Kim's group and Carol at the same meeting, because
Oh.
those are two navigation models in Arlington right now.
Uh-huh.
I'll check with, it's the 23rd is the meeting, is that right?
I think so.
There was some other meeting she couldn't come to because it was her kid's birthday or something, but I'll lean on her on this one.
Okay, and then I can send Kim a note
Mhm.
and see also if it works for her. And if only one can come, we can have more discussion time, or we can talk about getting Kristen to go ahead and present if she's ready. Judy, do you think youth mental health, maybe not a good month for a report out, or I can keep that on the agenda for every month?
I don't think there's much right now. Unless she's in the hospital.
Do you
Right
want to just say for this group, Judy, I thought that was a really powerful youth mental health and wellness meeting that you had last week, was
Oh.
it?
A couple of weeks ago, right. Now I've got to go back and refresh my memory.
So
That
there
where
was the woman who's a counselor at the schools or something and was talking about a
Wendy,
particular.
we had Wendy Korea. Right?
No,
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 which one?
the counselor at Claremont.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, the counselor at Claremont. Oh, yes, sorry. Yes. Well, Kristen Devaney invited her because she thought that we could really use someone at Youth and Mental Health, the committee, someone who was really on the ground every day working with kids. And I think she hears quite a bit from this particular counselor. And Kristen doesn't feel that, she doesn't have the opportunities to be there with the kids and hear everything. So I thought that was really powerful also. It was, the counselor did not hold back. She, just briefly for those of you who weren't there, she has kids out on the playground who come up to her or see her the first thing in the morning and are, little kindergartners, first graders who are just sobbing when they come to school, or just sit down by themselves in the playground and just cry. They're just so sad right now. They're just kind of lost. And she's saying they're seeing a lot of marriages, a lot of families that are having marital difficulties, and the kids see that, and the kids are sometimes, the parents, even though they're not getting along, continue living in the same house and kind of take turns with the kids, and the kids are getting so mixed up, and they need adults, they need someone to listen to them. And she said it's not just once in a while. This is on a regular basis. And truthfully, I mean, Megan, I went home, I told my daughter about this, and she is a reading teacher at Barcroft. She said they see the same kinds of things. And these are in kids who threaten, not just at Barcroft, but she was saying that over at the other school also. Trying to remember the name of the school. It's over by Wakefield. But they're sort of threatening to do things to themselves because they're just so sad. And she just kept saying, we're not talking about just a few kids. This is lots and lots of kids. So,
and what I heard, also, it sounded like a lot of COVID. She said, you've got kids who are they don't have the opportunity to learn how to be good citizens and good friends. And so
Yes.
you've missed a growth opportunity. And so she said, they'll look at you one-on-one when you say, you know, what's acceptable behavior, what's bullying behavior. And then they get out on the playground and, you know, she said she had an incident where a kid may have broken another kid's arm sitting
Right.
on them. And
Right.
other kids hitting their head against the wall. So it was sort of like they're hearing, you know, they're still hearing what they should be doing, but it's just, I think I think she presented it as sort of a COVID effect. You know, the
Yes.
marriages is a COVID effect. The, you know, people having to stay together is probably not just COVID, but other, you know, other issues. But yeah, it was so powerful. And she just said, thanks for listening. I just
Yeah.
brought all this with me, you know, from school today.
The kids missing school, and because they've missed being together when they were home on virtual, they weren't learning the getting along with each other kind of stuff. And then they come to school in person. And she said, yes, she sees so much bullying and kids hurting one another.
I guess I'd like to comment that going to school in person with masks hides a huge amount of the emotional content we would normally share with each other. It is
Right.
not the same as in person. They're there physically, but they're still isolated.
Right.
Masking really is a problem. The teachers can't read the kids can't read the teachers. So, you know, something that's very sarcastic and very funny is now mean. And so it is a very different situation. Every report I see says kids are not just behind academically, that you can catch up on, but they're desperately behind developmentally, socially. And that's really hard to catch up on. They're learning bad personal habits of interaction.
Yeah.
And so does that argue for, I'm not sure, more mental health, more counselors, more group sessions, more mindfulness sessions, more something? And you know, I'd love to advocate for that all year.
I know.
Let's
She
fix
was
that
also saying
problem. I mean,
people can't
the
get their
first-
kids appointments for their kids. There's not enough
Oh, mental health is
psychologists,
impossible.
counselors.
3 months out if you want a mental health appointment.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no. But that's why you have to have non-professional mental health. And that's
Right.
mindfulness for one thing. It's probably yoga. I'm not sure. I don't know the range of you know, mediation methods, but you can't have professionals if they're not available. And the school can't hire them. We can tell the schools to hire more and they can't get them either.
Right.
So it's a matter of what do you do with a teacher that cares, with parents that cares, with PTAs that care, with, you know, housing units like the affordable housing units where they care. What do you do to help the kids learn more socialization, a little more sensitivity towards each other, less bullying? It's got to be done by, you know, maybe professionals, but not in that field, lay people.
Mhm.
It sounded
hard
like what
right
she
now.
was saying, like she's become a trusted adult for them. And so that was an outlet for individual kids. But, you know, I guess it comes back to this kind of trusted adult or, you know, having another warm body in the schools who can be a little bit of a pressure valve
Mhm.
that doesn't
Well,
need the training, the level of training that we're having trouble hiring for professional counselors.
Yeah, I was the activities coordinator at Williamsburg Middle School. And my office, my little teeny cubicle, had kids there all the time because they just needed someone to talk to, even if there's just silly stuff. You know, they just needed a connection. That's all.
I was late because there was one of our young kids, she's actually in her 30s, but she had some issues she just had to talk about related to family and her own kids. And I was not paying attention to the clock, but I think even if I had been, I wouldn't have broken off that conversation.
Mhm.
So yeah, we need to do that.
It's a hard time to get volunteers. I mean, because people are still worried about COVID, and a lot of them are trying to get back to their jobs. I know that I think APS is doing a really good job in, you know, recruiting volunteers and thanking them. But I'm guessing, I don't know, that'd be interesting to find out too, what the school situation is. Are we looking for more people to come in and help on to be there on the playgrounds? I don't know. I don't even know the situation. I signed up to be a volunteer, but now I can't do it. Like, not until I don't have to be super healthy. You know, it's just, but that would be, there are so many different aspects here. And you know, people care and would help. And maybe we can help figure out what some of those things are that would help.
I'm gonna wrap us up because I see we're at past the hour. But I do want to start drafting our request for the county board, even if this year it's a little bit kind of general, as I think I would say last time was. Oh, hey, Sally. But I think, you know, just putting placeholder. Oh, sorry. Not sure. I hope you can put up that for just a minute so we can wrap up. My daughter's just getting home, so it's going to be a lot harder. But hopefully, sorry, she's locked out. It's okay. She'll get it. We can have some general requests, even if we don't attach funding, but there was this COVID funding that I'm not sure if it's gone yet. But that was funding for short-term hires that the county had. And I know they were putting some of it into